Good morning and welcome back, everybody, to our board meetings. This morning is Saturday, January 9th. We have a special board meeting with a special board meeting agenda. We'll start off with a special meeting to discuss specifically what the proper phrase of it is, the special bonds. What's the qualified? Thank you. For a second, it skipped me. And then we will go into closed session to discuss negotiating matters. Why don't we start off by taking roll? So, Vicki?
Mark Egeman.
Here.
Bob Johnson.
Here.
Vicki Lee is here. Tony Borelli.
Here.
Scott Zimmerman.
Here.
Dathan Paterno.
Here.
And Tom Sotos.
Here.
Okay. It's the qualified school construction bonds. So all of January, as we know, is a busy month. On the 11th will be an ISBA sponsored event on communications. The 12th we'll have a second meeting of the Community Communication Council. The 19th will be the second formal meeting of the negotiating committee with the PREA. 20th is or was scheduled for the board hearing or residency, now been canceled. January 26th will be the next regular board meeting for all of us to attend. Let me just decrease this so I can read my whole writing here. On another topic, on the 20th, by the way, that's been canceled because the family has withdrawn their children from the district, and therefore we will not have any contestation to the dismissal process. On another topic, I contacted the board regarding the midterm review superintendent's goals. I originally proposed a 6 p.m. start time on January 11th, just prior to the ISAB meeting. Since that time, Dr. Heinz has informed me that she would like to present her goals and provide the board with a review at the January 26th meeting. Also, the district has some new information that will need to be discussed in closed session with an attendance special session on Monday evening. In light of Dr. Heinz's request and other circumstances, it would now seem best to defer. I suggest to the board to defer my request of a 6 p.m. start on January 11th, this coming Monday, and considering Dr. Heinz's presentation, convene that meeting to discuss the superintendent's evaluation in February after the presentation of the regular board meeting for the midterm evaluation. That date, of course, is open to consensus opinion. So why don't we just deal with that first? So is there any comments about moving the Monday's discussion on evaluation till after the January 26th meeting so that we can hear the comments from Dr. Heinz? Okay. Now, that being the case, would anybody make a suggestion as far as when we can convene to do that evaluation? And we do have, I'm looking right now in the calendar.
Two February dates are the 8th and the 22nd that we have regularly scheduled meetings. February 8th, my team is working to put together a couple things for the committee of the whole to talk with the board about. We have a 6:30 start on that meeting on the COW. The 22nd is our regularly scheduled board meeting. We are scheduled to begin at 7 p.m. that night, so if you wanted to spend time, you could start closed as early as you all think you could get here. 5:30, 6 o'clock, I don't know what your availability is, because I would think you'd want probably at least an hour to
Well,
talk about.
I'm thinking about 45 minutes.
45 minutes, okay. So I can put a new time, schedule and close, just let me know when.
Or the option is, since we will be utilizing that instrument which contains 6 or 7 items on it, and just simply reviewing that document to see where we stand, where we are with that document, we can certainly do half of the document on the 8th and half of the document on the 15th. That way it won't be so burdensome to everybody.
I like that, Tony.
The 15th or the 22nd?
The 8th and the
8th and the
22nd.
22nd.
Okay, I thought I heard the 15th.
Did I say
And meet it-
15?
And meet at like 6:30 or,
Yeah, for a half hour each day, and that way we can break it up and it won't become so burdensome.
I like that.
This is for Lori's
Evaluation.
My mid-year.
Mid-year evaluation.
You're proposing we do it in closed or open?
The evaluation is closed.
Well, you can discuss that, I guess.
It might be nice for everyone to hear our evaluation of Lori.
Well, we can take a consensus opinion on that and see where it is. However, you know, evaluations are typically done in closed, due to certain comments that may come out. We certainly do not want to undermine the position of the superintendent, so you have to keep that in
I
mind.
feel that's a lot of private information. I don't think anybody who works for a company or would want everyone
yeah, I don't think we
listening to
need
the
to have this-
review. I don't
let's
think that's
just-
necessary.
We don't need to talk about this now. Let's just move on, and we're just agreeing on dates, and then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
I wasn't necessarily saying that we should do it in open, I was just asking if we're proposing closed or open. I still haven't decided whether.
Right, historically, here and in place elsewhere, just so you know, this will be your first round, both Mark and Tom as newer board members. That is, as Tony said, done in closed session. What Tony, I know, did last year was the board talked in closed, and then when we came out into open, you summarized for anybody that might be interested in the community, the comments and the feelings, you know, what was working well, strengths, and then what opportunities or areas of focus that you, the board felt as though I should, you know, continue to drive.
Yeah, absolutely. As I stated about a month or two ago, I'm going to be very diligent about bringing information from closed sessions and try and, you know, without giving the down and dirty nitty gritty, to try and give a summarization of what we have spoken about in closed session. So, as Mark has suggested, all we're trying to do right now is get a time. And my suggestion would
That's
be
fine. I like your suggestion, let's do that.
take those 2 days.
Yeah.
So, start times, Dr. Heinz, on those days?
So,
A half
The
hour on
8th,
each day?
it will then be, come February 8th, our start time will be 6 PM for you to talk about my mid-year progress, and then we will go into the committee of the whole at 6:30. And then February 22nd, our regular board meeting is to begin at 7, so I'll have you come in at 6:30 to discuss the remainder of my evaluation categories, and then we'll start our meeting at 7. And I'll include that in my memo, and we'll make revisions for Monday.
And if we could just make sure that the agenda states at 6:30 or the conclusion
Yes.
of whatever, so that way if we have 10 more minutes to go, you know, you don't wanna have people waiting outside for half an hour, but if it's 5 minutes, I hate, you know, when we post it
Sure.
at 6:30, it's like,
Gotcha.
You know,
We
we'll
sometimes
be
don't
done in
conclude
30
thoughts.
minutes?
no, but we don't conclude thoughts, so if we need to leave
25.
10, 15 minutes, it's nice to post it for the public that it's at the conclusion of.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good. So then we'll go forward. And to Tom's comments, have everybody please think about the whether open or closed, because the motion will be made to go into closed for that particular topic. And of course, it's up to whatever the board's decision is. So from time to time, infrequent aspects of board life come up. And recently, a question was made on a reconvened meeting, an open meeting. I believe we're all familiar with the nuances of the Open Meeting Act and the ability to discuss and vote at a regular meeting. Per policy 2200, a reconvened meeting, if the time and place of the reconvened meeting is disclosed at the original meeting, it may be held, and if not disclosed, must have a 24-hour public notification. 48-hour notification. Also, the president or any 3 members of the board can convene a special meeting as long as all members have been notified at 48 hours in the meeting. Only topics of the agenda can be discussed at a special meeting, but in essence, it is conducted as a regular meeting with discussion and voting as may be. I have taken the liberty of confirming this point with the Illinois Association of School Boards to make certain that special meetings are conducted in this fashion. Basically, the only requirements are that there's notification, and whatever's on the agenda is the only item that you can really speak about in a special meeting. This may arise again, for instance, as negotiations continue, and developments may require such meetings. And Scott, if you recall back in 12, when we were going through the last negotiation, there was a lot of impromptu meetings.
Yes.
A lot of
Very.
things that popped up where we had to get together and sit down real quick and talk about things. So just throwing it out there for everybody. The schedule is going to get, over the next several months, pretty crazy. Things are just going to, going to, why isn't this on the website? Why isn't that? Things are going to happen real quick, and stuff is going to go on and come off pretty quickly. So, I will certainly do my best, as I always have, on trying to keep everybody as up to date as possible. There was one other item I wanted to, but it escapes me now. But it just nuts and bolts kind of stuff, no big deal. So that all being said, since this is a special meeting and it is conducted as similar to a regular meeting, we still have to have time for public comments. So I know it's 20 to 9 or a quarter to 9 in the morning on a Saturday. Not many people want to be here, but I still have to ask the question. So if there's anybody in the room who would like to make a comment on something not on the agenda, and not seeing anybody, I think we can move right quick. So the one item on our special agenda this morning is to talk about these qualified bonds. I had a long and fruitful email over the weekend or during this past week with Luann, but I'm very interested, and I asked her specifically to go over the bonds to make certain that the board was comfortable with the nuances of these bonds and how would it impact us going forward. So now I'll flip it over to you, Luann.
So we had talked about the bonds at the last meeting, the qualified school construction bonds. And the first thing I want to point out is that even if you approve us sending in an application to apply for these bonds, the board's under no obligation to actually issue the bonds. So if you decided to do no work on the buildings, we just would not issue the bonds, and the money would go back, would just stay in the pool, and then they would probably have another session for any remaining funds for districts to apply for.
Can I just interrupt right here? Now, what would you prefer? To go through your thing and then take questions, or can we ask questions as we go?
Okay, let me just make a couple comments. Okay, so one, I had Elizabeth Hennessy at William Blair look at what the max amount was that we could ask for based on our DSEB and the amount that we can pay per year. And that was a little over $34 million, and that would be an interest savings of about $19.4 million. Now, the one thing you need to realize is that that would basically use up all the DSEB till 2035, and this is also based on assumptions. It's based on very low CPI, very low changes in EAV. So it's a very conservative numbers that we're looking at. We have talked before that the buildings do have an extensive amount of work to be done. So the work that would be left, this would cover all of our health, life, safety work. So all of that would be completed. And then in all of the buildings except for Jefferson and Lincoln, the only kind of remaining things to be done would be pretty much like flooring and some casework that's needs to be replaced because it's damaged. At Jefferson and Jefferson and Lincoln, it would be a lot more because we have to look at what kind of programmatic changes we're making. So at Jefferson alone, we'd be looking at about $7 million in remaining work, but that's really depending on what happens with that building. And then at Lincoln, we have to look at programmatic changes, so we'd be looking at a lot more work to be done at that facility.
Luann, can you just give an approximation of millions?
Let me see here. Just get all that. Let's say probably about $2 million at Lincoln would still need to be done.
Luann?
Mhm.
I am going to jump in at this point. We are focusing on Safe One to Drive for now.
Right.
And you just mentioned programmatic changes. Is that something that really should be considered for once the Safe One and Dry corrections have been made, and that is more for the 21st century issues that we have to talk about in 4 years or so?
The ones that I'm talking about at Jefferson and Lincoln, yes. So once we get done with safe, warm, and dry, our next phase will be, let's become energy efficient. Okay, these buildings run 24/7, so I don't think your homes do. I hope they don't. So we have no controls on these facilities. So the heat's on 24/7, air conditioning 24/7.
Is that really true? Because years ago, when we went through this entire HVAC systems, it was an absolute requirement of the board that the new HVAC systems were smart, that they were sent to a centralized computer system, that they were monitored, everyone who was on that board. So was this a failure to do something, or is that the older, like, I know there's a few buildings we didn't replace, and so therefore maybe those don't, but.
So one of the buildings was controlled by Siemens, and that equipment has all reached past its useful life. Typically, when I set this up, when we would have the buildings controlled, it's a central control so that Ron would be able to see every building on his computer 24/7. So what happened is that work was basically left up to the head custodian. So without training on how to use these complicated systems, you have Siemens in one building, they just put Johnson controls in, but they never like hooked up with Johnson controls. So, if I want to look at what's going on, I have to go to the building and look at a computer.
And that is with the new HVAC and with, for example, at Carpenter, correct?
Right.
Their
Right,
system is-
but I want to make sure I understand this. The statement was that these things just run 24/7, which implies that we just have the heat blasting for 24/7. These systems, if someone took training, and I'm going to guess that training is less than 6 months of winter of running the heat, could be made so that they work like a smart thermostat and they turn down at night and we can run them efficiently. Is that not true? Because we spent a ton of money on this, and this is really upsetting unless I'm misunderstanding something.
Well, I can have Ron talk to you about it at the next meeting because him and I are very, very well educated in how to operate buildings.
No, that's not my question.
No, but I think you need to have Ron talk to you about it too, because we do not have, he can't see anything that's going on in any of these buildings.
Sure.
But even if we sent someone, then we have Johnson Controls in one building, we have Siemens in another building. And Siemens has expired. Johnson, we're not even hooked into their system.
But can we make, I think what Scott's asking is, can we make that happen, so,
With one building.
with one building, even if it's one building at a time?
That would be it.
Okay.
Right, so my suggestion, what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
this was set up years ago, we realized that there were different systems of different ages, and that connecting them would be a project unto itself. We realized that. But the board said, let's put in smart systems in every building, like when we air conditioned Field for the $8 million or $6 or whatever it was, there was supposed to be a system in there that the custodian could set up so that it ran efficiently. Did that not happen?
It's not happening.
How is that even, wow.
Can I lend and this is just my opinion, only because I have direct, you can put in the smartest system possible. If all the systems aren't working kind of together, it
Yeah.
really becomes so burdensome that any human is going to, I don't want to use the word fail, but it's going to be very difficult for them to keep up with it. And even if the system is working, that isn't even enough sometimes for it to actually work smart the way you and I want it to work smart. So it's in defense of the custodians, sometimes it's the lesser of two evils to let the system run 24/7 than run the risk of overnight freezing and then blowing coils.
I understand that.
Because to replace a coil, you're looking at $10,000.
Right.
And so sometimes custodians, and the only reason I stepped in on this is because I found myself in 3 of my properties doing the exact same thing. And at the end of the month, when I'm writing that $4,500 electric bill in the summer and then $6,000 gas bill, I think to myself, damn, I really got to get this control thing going because I could save a lot of money there. And then I do, and then something happens, and then I'm writing a check for $15,000 to fix what wouldn't have happened if I let the system run all night. So yes, I agree 100% that it would be ideal to get these systems to work that way. Really Johnson Controls, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars just for one building to get it to work right. It's not just throw a thermostat.
I do
Yeah,
understand.
I think what we have here is 2 issues. One, the board going all the way back to 12, when we were originally talking about Franklin and Carpenter and discussing field. I mean, we talked about unifying all of the controls and all of the buildings. And with the work that was done, with the original $11 million of work, which was at Washington and Field and Carpenter, and all of those buildings were supposed to have been tied together, from what I understand, so that somebody could be on an iPad at their home regulating those buildings. And it was my understanding that we had two systems basically in place. About half of our buildings were tied in together, and about the other half of the buildings were independent.
At least the new ones, the
Yes.
Carpenter, the Field, the Franklin, those should have been tied together.
No.
Okay, so my frustration is certainly not with this administration. Please don't take it as such. My frustration is a complete and utter failure, it sounds like, from someone to doing the job that the board asked that they did.
Yes.
And I almost wonder if we ought to look into that a little bit
I
further, and
agree.
what can be done, because that's a failure of duty, and that ought to be out there, that this was something that was, we spent so much time on this.
Previous
This is
architects
utterly
need to
upsetting.
have,
This
certainly should have been
never
aware.
happen.
So we'll look into this, Scott.
And what I would like to
Yeah.
then say is, and again, please don't take this away, so how does the next board not run into this, right? Because let's look at our policies and process, what's in place, so that we don't wind up with, you guys told us, and not that you would, but you see what I'm saying, last one, they said we were doing this, and maybe it was there's this subtle nuance of what we said we were doing. Somehow we gotta figure out how we communicate this a little bit better, so boards understand fully what they're doing, because that sentence should never be uttered, that they're just running.
And that you
24/7
have a
on every
cross-check,
building.
that when you give a
Right.
directive, that it's done.
Yeah.
So for this purpose, the way I solved it, we would probably have to approve not only a company to do the controls, but then approve a contract for that company to
Yeah.
monitor the upkeep of the controls.
Right.
Because once the company's out and one janitor makes a change and then another janitor makes a change, and then all of a sudden you're not getting notifications, and then no one really knows how the intricacy is. So, I mean, this is what you guys are looking for.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I have. I can just go and I see, my tenant on the fourth floor is at 71 degrees. She just called me, I need it warmer, bam, bam. This for one building cost me $40,000.
Right, I mean,
it's a lot.
I work for a company
Yeah.
that owns 300 buildings, I understand
There
this
you go.
fully. What I'm getting at is, not only this, but in other areas.
Right.
Procedurally,
Yeah.
there can be this, well, they didn't quite say it exactly that way, so we'll do, so, like, the way my former company, when we were public, or my company now, when we were publicly traded, handled this because procedures weren't being followed, was they hired an audit firm that audited policies and procedures. And maybe as a board, some point down the future, we should talk about, do we need our own audit firm to make sure that when we say we're gonna do a policy, it's implemented to the spirit of what we had intended.
Or we can have a ad hoc committee.
Something like
That
that. So,
would-
okay, let's
yeah.
go on to what we were talking about,
That's
but
that extra work.
sorry to
Yeah.
lose just.
That's okay.
So,
Well, I guess, yeah, and I guess going back to the bonds, so we could talk about, all the different things. There's so many things we could dream of to do with all the buildings. I mean, from my perspective, what this is about is, do we want to approve going for the maximum amount of bonds, not even knowing if we will get that amount? We could get nothing, we could get a sliver, and then later we can talk about all the projects we have. How do we want to prioritize them? What do we want to do? I think you've made the case. We have more things we could do than money we could borrow. So I prefer not to
Yeah.
talk about individual projects, buildings. I think it's more conceptually about, do people have opinions about the amount that we should apply for or not, or should we just apply for the maximum because we have no idea what we'll get?
We don't know if
have
we're gonna get
zero
it.
obligation to do anything,
Right.
if we get any sort of allocation, and then we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
And so
And
the
that's-
argument is, should we give
That-
ourselves and future board optionality? That's really the thing in front of us. Should we?
Well,
should
we don't
make
even have to
this
decide that
application?
now.
don't
This
even
is
have to
just
decide that. I agree
simply
with
sending
that.
a form in, asking for a certain amount of
Right.
bond issuance capability, and then we have no idea what we'll get, and we can talk later, if we get anything, about whether or not we want to issue the bonds.
Now, and that's really where I wanted to go. Thank you, Bob, because I don't want to get sidetracked in all these different areas. But my question originally was going to be, first a statement, then a question. I think we all realize that to get all this work done, we don't have the cash and the capital funds to cover all of this. You have earmarked $10 million. I get
Correct.
that. But $10 million is only barely a third of this. And with these new bonds, so therefore, we were going to have to issue bonds at some point. Okay.
Correct.
So we have already had our discussions that we have non-referendum bonds, referendum bonds. We have a certain limited amount of non-referendum bonds, the amounts that we can actually glean from that.
Correct.
The going back, and we have to have at some point the idea of going to a referendum to increase the non-referendum bonds back up to that $3.1 million. But back to what Bob had said about 2 or 3 meetings ago, maybe 2 meetings ago, was what effect will these bonds have on our taxpayers? And Bob mentioned that, and I agree with him, that we don't necessarily want to increase taxes much beyond where they are now. However, if we can maintain the taxes, certainly it's a win-win. They're not going to go up, and actually over time, the cost dollars, it'll actually be less burdensome over time if the number is held consistent, and we'll be able to fix our buildings. Using that $10 million, what I really want to get to is how do we utilize that $10 million? The way I see it, which would be a win-win, was to ask for the full amount, hopefully we get the full amount, and then take that $10 million and prepay down the bond cost if that's possible. Because that way we can get the money without having to pay the interest and then decrease the amount by prepaying,
Well,
if that's possible.
If we got these bonds, remember, we're getting a refund of the 93% of the interest.
Right.
So what we prepared, we did this debt service tax levy and tax rate by year, which
Right.
is in all of your packets. So what I wanted to point out is that in 2020, if we did like absolutely nothing, all the bonds would be paid off. That rate would fall off of the taxes completely. And what we highlighted here is that if we got the 34 million, kind of looking at what your tax rates would be. So like for this year, it's like 24 cents, and then it's going to bounce around in the teens until the bonds would be paid off. But yes, people would still have a payment. I mean, it's if we do nothing, 2020 comes, everything stops.
But no, buildings still need work.
Correct.
Yep.
That's correct.
Because the
So-
2020 point is when we finish paying the field bonds.
Correct.
So the Emerson bonds, I believe this year is the last payment, and or maybe that payment was already made, because we're in 16.
I think we have another year.
300,000, I think, is the last.
17.
Yes, $300,000 is the final payment for the Emerson bond, and then we have the field bonds expiring in 20.
Correct.
But then we still have arguably $30 million
Plus.
of needs. And so therefore, and since that was never accounted for, the concept was that $10 million that we've set aside still will not cover the requirements, so we still have to go to bonds.
So the 10 million, what I did not include in here, and I had addressed it, is parking lots. I was told, don't include parking lots, so I didn't include that. Well, we're looking at a lot of money to fix those parking lots correctly, and I did not include this building. So this building, parking lots, we wouldn't have a lot left from that 10 million.
But we do have an allocation of 500,000
per year, which we could use to churn away at the other items that we have in there,
Right.
like flooring and stuff
Right.
like that.
And the buildings will take the priority of that money versus the ESC. We'll limp along, we're okay.
Well, no, the chimneys,
Other than the roof.
it's
right.
gone in about 1 year. It's coming down.
But I guess if we can get back to Bob's point, Luann, your hope today was for this approval. And then depending on when and if we receive the grant, finding out how much, and then really engaging in deep, many, many conversations at a deep level about how to issue, how much,
Correct.
so on and so
Right,
forth.
because we could come back, the state could come back and say you get zero, and we're
Right.
talking about all
And
this
then we're
stuff now,
spending
so
more
why talk
negotiation
about it
time.
now? Let's
Exactly.
wait, we've got bids out that we don't even know what things are gonna cost, we haven't even approved spending that money.
Right.
So I think
Right.
this is just an an exercise to
Preliminary.
see, to potentially open an option for us, and then we can discuss whether we want to exercise that option
Yeah.
for how much.
My-
Dathan wants to say something.
My most important concern was that everybody understood what the bonds are, what they're for, what the potential is. And the number one paramount thought, to me at least, is that the necessity for bonds to complete this construction is paramount. We don't have the capital funding, nor was it 10 years ago ever thought about with the original referendum. So we will have to continue our non-referendum bonding to get this stuff done.
Correct. And one other thing I wanted to point out is even though we have the capacity to issue the 34 million, you can still decide to go to referendum.
Right.
I mean, so you can still say, yes, we have the capacity, and the state understands we have the capacity, which is one of the number one requirements, but you can still say, you know what, we're going to ask the taxpayers. So, I mean, even if you get this, you can still go to referendum to actually issue it.
And we have done, as a team, some preliminary work in terms of, we've attended a workshop, we've reached out for further communication with a potential company that we would partner with, should we decide, should you as a board decide to move towards a referendum down the line. We're doing some preliminary prep work, so we have information for you if and when you let us know that you're interested in heading down that path.
So-
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
Sorry. The other thing that, this exercise has helped me with is, remember, I came in the middle of the movie. So this has helped me to see the first part of the movie. So if anybody ever wants to sit down, or you guys want to sit down as a group sometime and kind of really dig into this and understand what we're doing or what we need to do with these buildings, I'd be more than happy to. So
Which is a perfect segue to something we need to put back on the agenda, would be the development of your
committees,
facilities and your
financial
financial
committees.
committees.
Right.
So, because once you get in here and really dig into it, you can really see, what needs to be done in these buildings. I know we're throwing around a lot of large numbers that are made up of a lot of smaller numbers, as you can see from the report I prepared for the state. But once you get in there, you really can get a good understanding of what's going on.
Are these bond monies that we're applying for solely for capital projects? Can you use that money for anything else?
No,
Or it
it's
has to be for capital projects?
capital projects only.
Okay.
The only thing I need to know to give unequivocal support for that application is, if we ask for the maximum, does that decrease the probability that they would say yes?
No, it doesn't.
Good question, Dathan.
But that is a very
If we
good
ask for half,
question.
they'll say, yeah, we'll give them that. If we ask for all of it, they'll say, that's too much, we'll say no.
Well, they could come back and say, well, you asked for 34 million, but we have 15 million because you guys were school district number 50 and 49 people were ahead of you in priority. So they
how
could
expeditious
actually.
we are with this might determine how much we have available.
No, because everything's due by the 15th, and then the
Oh.
committee will
We could just
look at
get a
it.
lesser amount based on the
Right.
pool of applicants. They
Okay.
could divvy it
It's
up
not
and
a
give
first come,
everybody
first
a
served,
little
though.
piece.
Okay.
No.
All right.
We'd have had it
Yeah.
done.
Do they go needs based, basically? Do they go to the application and say, all right,
Well,
the school district
the-
is really falling apart, they need the money, or?
Well, the first thing is if you have the debt capacity or if you've issued a referendum and you're shovel ready. And so we have the debt capacity and we're shovel ready. And I think our application, which is going to actually be larger than this packet going to them because it'll include all the health, life, safety surveys, we show that we're capacity and we're shovel ready. Now, if they have enough school districts where it would use up all the money that meet all those requirements, then the next level down is what is your low income. So then then we're going to get knocked off.
So there's no risk in asking for the maximum?
No.
Okay.
So if they're requiring us to be shovel ready, or if that's one of the criteria, if the money is approved, if we actually get gifted the money, we decide not to use, from my understanding, we're not voting on using it, we're voting on
Correct.
just asking for it.
Correct.
So how soon do we have to decide to use it before they take it back from us?
Within 18 months, we would need to issue the bonds.
Okay.
And then you have
3 years to complete the
begin-
work from when
complete
it's
the
awarded,
project.
so like.
But we have 18 months to decide whether we want to use it or not. And
Correct.
if we,
Correct.
if we decide we don't, we write them a letter saying, take your money back.
Yeah, I mean, I would want to let them know so they could reissue the money.
Yes.
Rather than,
So yes, Tom, we write them down.
So we're really just voting on whether we should apply for
You
it.
That's
got
it.
It's the
We're
lotto.
gonna-
We
we're
can't
gonna
win
use-
if we don't play. Right now, we're asking to play.
Yeah, to me, this is
It's
a
like
bit
the lottery.
this is a bit like getting a massive credit limit as a family. If you know that your family is disciplined enough to not overspend, then it doesn't matter if you have a $14 million credit limit. That wouldn't bother me as a family because I know we're not going to do that. If our board is wise enough to not overspend or to spend judiciously, then I don't care if we go for $34 million.
that's correct. I mean, we have 7 people here that will vote before we spend that money.
Right. So any other questions regarding the specific bonds, how they're going to be used? They are currently, the board has no obligation to utilize them. And as has been stated, this is for the application process only. Are there any other thoughts to that?
I just wanted to be clear, so the 34 million represents a dollar figure that will not allow us to borrow any more or bond any more money for how long?
Well,
After, if we take this money?
Okay, the way we laid it out was for
repeat
20
that.
years. But if you look at Elizabeth's spreadsheet, you'll notice that the EAV does not increase for the next 20 years, and God help us if
It
that's
better
what
not.
happened.
Right, okay.
So even if the CPI stays low, I mean, our EAV is gonna go up. I mean, just drive around here and look. I mean, the EAV. But we wanted to be very, very conservative. So as
Okay.
long as the EAV increases, it will open up more money, and then you always have the option of going to referendum to raise our D-sub amount.
Okay, I just wanted to
So-
clarify.
So if, go ahead.
One more
Teresa.
clarification. I mean, the truth of the matter is, if we're going to approve the application, we're gonna use the money. We're not, I mean, I don't think.
I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know about that. I mean, somebody said we could borrow 34 million. I mean, I think those will be from my perspective, a big discussion about, the fact that the district would not be able to borrow money for another 20 years, and that we'd be on the hook for paying that back. And are the projects that are going to be put forward ones that, the board will decide are valuable? Because we've talked about some already that we've not had a unanimous agreement on that. So I would have questions about, whether we should use, if we got the full amount of this, whether we would use all of it or,
Which brings
not all
up
of it.
another question. We don't have to use all of it. We can use some of it and
Correct.
return the
Yep.
rest.
Yeah, it's like Dathan said, it's all an option. It's basically, we're asking for the
Right.
maximum amount, and we don't know what the bank will come back and say, no, we're not gonna give you that amount, we'll give you this amount, and then we'll deal with that at that point in time.
Yeah,
They
I
could
don't-
come back and say 0. We're talking about all this, they could come back and say 0.
I don't object to having the 34,000, but I do know, or 34 million. I do know that once it's there, it's going to be a lot easier.
More tempting.
It's gonna be a lot easier to say, oh, well, we have it, let's fix this now, because it really needs fixing. And with this board and any board, it's gonna be difficult to give that money back once you have it, and it's gonna be difficult to not spend it on fixing our driveways and our, so,
Not the driveway.
I'm just, if
It
we're
wouldn't
gonna.
be for me.
if
I'll
we're-
tell you that I feel that I can be disciplined about saying we have that money available, but we need not spend it.
Right. Well, and you
I'm
have
just speaking for
23
myself.
million available right now. I mean, even if we didn't get this, we have 23 million that we can issue
I understand the
in
time.
non-referendum.
Applying and giving the money back does not preclude us from applying again. It doesn't put us in like the bottom of the barrel and saying, hey, these guys already applied once, they took
No.
the money, they gave it back, they didn't use it, now they're asking for it again 2 years later.
No, I mean, who
We
knows?
don't
I
know
mean,
if this money will be available
Right.
again.
We don't know if this
But it
program will.
shouldn't preclude us if it is available.
Right.
right.
Oh, so
Apply
this
again.
isn't a ongoing, this is a program that could be just temporary.
The government could
Correct.
change.
This just came out.
Correct.
That's, yeah.
This just
is-
came out.
This is not an
And
annual.
the attractiveness of it is that the federal government will reimburse
The
over
interest.
90% of the interest.
93.
That's what makes this
Very
more attractive relative to other options that we have available at our disposal.
Well, and
So,
currently.
so even if we did burn all 33 million, we're actually saving the taxpayers 19 million because there's no interest. You know?
Right, they're putting their tax dollars towards actual bricks and mortar as opposed to a bank.
Right.
At the end of the day, if we kept taxes the same, more of your tax dollar in the future with this will go towards bricks and mortar than interest if we do nothing.
Right.
So these are arguments not to spend money.
No, these are not arguments to spend money,
No,
because I don't
I'm
think.
saying these are arguments that would come up later if
Yes.
we're
Yes.
ready to spend money.
Right, but I think every board that at least that I've been on, never wants to tie the hands of future boards where it's like, we borrowed everything you could possibly do, and then some crisis comes along, and they can't do anything. So I think there's a little bit of a self-governing mechanism to it that's in there by default anyways.
As an aside,
As tempting as it will be, obviously.
as an aside, I think that's exactly what happened with Emerson. I think because of the Emerson bonds, the supplemental bonding, when you take our capital levy and you combine it with the bonding levy, it was so high that there was no extra monies and we couldn't use the DSC bonds to do any capital work. And that's why for 20 years we're in the position we're in. So we don't want to repeat the sins of the past and tie the hands of somebody 15 years from now so that they can't fix a roof someplace because they can't issue any more bonds.
Yeah.
So again, this is a discussion for later. So are there any other further questions about the request to apply for these bonds? Because that's basically what we're dealing with. Any other questions? If not, we're ready for a vote on page 7 of the packet. It's an action item.
I have a change in our name, so whoever's going to read it, they're going to read from this one.
Bobby, you gonna read it?
Here.
Well, do I hear a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of Park Ridge-Niles Community Consolidated School District 64, Illinois, adopt Resolution 1157 approving the application of the Illinois State Board of Education for Qualified Schools Construction Bond designation for obligation to finance certain capital projects in and for Park Ridge-Niles Community Consolidated School District 64, Illinois, authorizing the President of the Board of Education of said school district to execute said application and directing an official of said school district to submit said application.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Let's start with Tom.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I direct, as per the motion, I'm directing the administration to proceed with the application process. I know that there's timelines that mandate that this be expedited. I'm sure it will be taken care of appropriately.
Going to FedEx today to the bond council.
Well, I guess that couldn't be any more expeditious then. All right, we're done with that. One single action item on our special meeting agenda, and if there's any other questions, I'll throw out there a motion to close the special meeting agenda of our session this morning, as we immediately will reconvene into our closed session that is a carryover from last month, so that we can go into discussions and information gathering over the upcoming contract negotiations. So there's a motion to close. Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any disagree? None? So the special meeting is now closed, and we will reconvene into our closed session.